Today we're beginning the Maimer וספרתם לכם that the Rebbe said on Lag Baimer, and it's based both on the fact that the pasuk in this week's parsha is where there's the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer, the pasuk וספרתם לכם, as well as the main content of the Maimers in order to explain what Lag Baimer is all about. Now, in order to know what a certain day is all about, or what any aspect, anything is all about, there's this general rule in Chassidus that the name Shmoy Asher Yikru Le B'Lashon HaKodesh, the name by which something is called in Lashon HaKodesh, is not just the name that describes it, but that is its essence of what it is. This is where it gets its sustenance from. So when we have a day like Lag Ba'omer, and rather than being called Chai Ir, or being called Hilul Ad Rashbi, or whatever else, the name is Lag Ba'omer. That means that the content by which we can understand everything about it, its essence of what it's all about, is Lag Ba'omer. That's what it is. So it's also understood that in order to understand properly what Lag Ba'omer is all about, which includes anything that connects Lag Ba'omer, and specifically the main thing that in Chassidus we're told, based on the writings of the Arizal, that the main idea of what Lag Ba'omer is the fact that it's the Hilula of Rashbi, of Reb Shimon ben Yochai. It's obvious that in order to understand that, we have to first understand the content of Sfiras Omer, and by understanding the content of Sfiras Omer, it helps us better understand specifically the idea of Lag Ba'omer. So now the Maimer starts with the pasuk in this week's parsha, וספרתם לכם ממachras HaShabbos Miyoim Haviyachem Esemer Atnufa. וספרתם, you should count lochem for yourselves from the day after Shabbos, from the day on which you lift up the Omer, which is the measurement of barley, the Omer that's lifted up from the day you bring that in the Beis HaMikdash, the Omer, which is this mincha in the Beis HaMikdash that's lifted up, raised in the Beis HaMikdash. Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tiyena, it should be 7 complete weeks. Ad Mimacharas HaShabbos HaShviyis, until the day following the 7th week. Tishperu Chamishim Yoim, should count 50 days, and then Vikravtem Mincha Chadash Al Hashem, on that 50th day, which is Shavuos, should bring a new mincha. Meaning, it starts off with the mincha of the Omer, and then you bring a new mincha, which is the first mincha, the first carbon that's brought from the new produce in the Beis HaMikdash. So there's various ideas in understanding Sfiras Omer that we will learn Be'ezras Hashem in the Maimer. But before understanding the whole thing, let's try and understand simply what is the concept of Sfiras Omer in the simplest sense. In the Beis HaMikdash, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, all new grain, the springtime is the time when there's the harvest for the new grain. All new grain from this specific year cannot be cut, neither can it be eaten. 2 prohibitions. One against cutting new grain, harvesting new grain, and the second is against eating new grain until the Karban HaOmer is brought. Meaning that from the first new grain in general in Eretz Yisrael, or even Chutz La'aretz, whatever it may be, but then in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they first went to the barley field. On the second day of Pesach, the day following the first day Yom Tov of Pesach. There's only one day Yom Tov in Eretz Yisrael. So Matzei Yom Tov of Pesach, they would go and cut the new grain, put it in boxes, in baskets, etc., bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, and an omer, which is a measurement of this barley, was then taken and lifted up in the Beis HaMikdash, and from this there was a mincha, which is like a regular mincha that a kohemet has taken off, a little part of flour and brought on the Mizbeach. Afterwards, it's then permitted to cut, to harvest all other grain fields, and it's permitted to eat the new grain at that time. That's called the Karban HaOmer. Second day of Pesach, they bring this Karban in the Beis HaMikdash, and all grain since last year's Omer, and without going to descriptions of all the specific halachas, but that's the general idea. That was the Minchas HaOmer. It's a mincha brought in the Beis HaMikdash, the Minchas HaOmer. Then, that same day that we brought the Karban HaOmer, in fact, it's not just that same day, we start from the night, because it has to be Sheva Shabbos Tumim is complete. So although the Karban is brought obviously by day, but the counting begins at night, because the counting is from the day, but it should be a complete day. From that time, from that day that the Karban HaOmer is brought, we count 49 days. On the 50th day is the Yom Tov of Shavuos, and on the Yom Tov of Shavuos another Karban is brought in Beis HaMikdash, a mincha that's brought from the Chadash, from the new grain that we bring then in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Sfiras HaOmer is actually a counting that takes place between one Karban and the next. Between the Karban HaOmer, or actually that day that we bring the Karban HaOmer, we begin counting day one. After completing the count of the 49 days, we bring another Karban in the Beis HaMikdash. Which makes also a difference in halacha, that according to many opinions, something that we'll see, according to many opinions, the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer is a mitzvah that applied midoiraisa, the Torah mitzvah, the Torah commandment of counting the Omer, only applied in the time of the Beis HaMikdash when there were actually karbanis. Now that there is no karbanis, we're only doing it as a remembrance. This isn't all opinions, but this is the majority of the opinions in the Rishonim, is that now the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer is midrabanan. It's like anything else that we do as a commemoration of the Beis HaMikdash. We still make a bracha, because on mitzvahs, rabbinic mitzvahs, we make brachas as well, but it's not a complete mitzvah. It will only be complete when once again we have a Beis HaMikdash and we bring karbanis. Now, let's look at the various things that happen over here. The mitzvahs that happen. Let's start with the mitzvahs in the beginning. There's the mitzvah of bringing the Omer, that measurement of barley, lifting it up in the Beis HaMikdash. Besides the mincha part, the Karban that's brought, it's the idea of lifting up the grain in the Beis HaMikdash and then bringing it as a Karban mincha to Hashem. Then there's the mitzvah of counting the Omer. And in counting the Omer, there's two aspects. There's Chamishim Yom, we count the days. So we don't really count 50 days, we count 49 days, but that brings to the 50th day that follows them. And Sheva Shabbos, we count the weeks. So there's lifting up the Omer, there's counting the Omer, but when we're counting, we don't just say Hayoim Yom Echad. We say Hayoim Yom Echad LaOmer. The count is not just a count of days, but it's a count of days that every day we're counting to the time that we brought the Karban HaOmer. So it's not just two separate mitzvahs, it's actually one continuation. There's mitzvah number one, lifting the barley in the Beis HaMikdash. Mitzvah number two is counting the days and the weeks. the two mitzvahs of counting days and counting weeks as they're connected to the mitzvah of the Omer. So we're counting towards the Omer. First of all, that's the mitzvah. Now, the Rebbe says in the Maimer, first of all, we have to understand what's going on over here. What's this all about? Especially in the deeper spiritual content and in the avodah of a person. What's lifting the Omer? What's counting, and specifically counting the Omer? What is the meaning of counting days? Why counting weeks? Why counting at all? Counting in general, we count objects. We count something that can get lost. We can't count something that can get taken away from us. Time is not an object. Time is not something that anyone can take away. Time is not something that can get lost. Counting time means we're counting days. What's the point of counting it? There's something deeper in the idea of what the counting is all about. And obviously, as we will learn in the Maimer, not something that the Rebbe brings out over here, but in general that's brought out in Chassidus, and that we'll learn in Mitzvah Hashem in the Maimer, is that the counting is not just a count, but it's a spiritual avodah in which a person is actually dealing with something specific that's connected to his own avodah, to his own self and his own service of Hashem, for which we count. And the word counting, וספרתם, doesn't just mean to count, but the word sfira means shine. Make it shine. And we say וספרתם lochem, we have to make ourselves shine. That's what we'll learn in the Maimer. But the other question that the Rebbe asks is the Torah uses a very interesting language. Mimochras haShabbos. From when do we start counting? The day after Shabbos. We don't start counting the day after Shabbos. We actually start counting from the day after Yom Tov. So that's something that the Chachamim learned, and the Chachamim received and had this as a Kabbalah, as a tradition that was passed on from throughout the generations, that this is how the sages learned what the meaning of the Pasuk is, what they received as a tradition throughout the chain of tradition, which that's the basis of our Torah, that our Torah is something which goes by tradition, by what we're told and taught by the previous generations, how they got it from Moshe Rabbeinu. So a person can't just look at the book and decide this is what's happening because this is what it says in the Sefer. The Sefer is important, but the Sefer is important to come together with the tradition, with what your teacher teaches you, what he learns from his teacher, etc. And what the Chachamim learned is that Shabbos means Yom Tov. Now they had issues with it. The Tzedukim, those who want to understand the Torah only by the simple meaning. Those who think that they can understand everything. They don't need the Chachamim. They look at the books and they'll decide based on the books, I can understand what it says in the Torah just as much as the Chachamim. They argued with the Chachamim. They made a lot of tzaras for the Chachamim. They did all types of tricks and underhanded things in order to get it their way, that the counting should start on a Sunday, on the day after Shabbos. But practically what the Chachamim said, it doesn't matter if it's Shabbos itself, it doesn't matter any day that it is, we start the day after Yom Tov. And the question is, what is the Torah getting at? What is the Torah alluding to? What's the point of the Torah using the word Shabbos? What are we teaching? What are we being taught by using the word Shabbos? Incidentally, this will also perhaps explain to us also the deeper aspect that obviously the Torah is showing us that some things are beyond what you understand. How does that connect to the simple meaning of what the Torah is using the word Shabbos? So why does the Torah use the word Machras HaShabbos? It could have said Machras HaYom Tov, and then we'd be spared all these issues. And then again, the word Admi Machras HaShabbos HaShvius. Sheba Shabbosos Tmimis Yena rather than Shavuos is also something which, although the Rebbe doesn't specify it in the questions, it's something which the Rebbe will explain in the Maimer. So this is the general thing which Be'ezus Hashem we will learn in this Maimer. What is the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer? What is the mitzvah of Korban HaOmer, of Minchas HaOmer? What's the mitzvah of Tznufas, of lifting up the measurement of barley? What is the mitzvah that follows it, that connects directly to it, and how does it connect directly to it? The idea of counting both days and weeks, and what is the wording of the Torah Shabbos? What's the Torah coming to teach us? Be'ez Hashem, we will continue in the coming shiurim.